Mama's Family had us rolling with laughter thanks to its outrageous humor, quirky characters, and that unforgettable Southern sass. But behind the punchlines and porch talk of Raytown real-life heartbreak was unfolding. Some of the beloved stars who made us laugh so hard are no longer with us, taken too soon by illness, tragedy, and unexpected turns that stunned their fans. Today we go beyond the laughter to uncover the personal stories of these talented legends and celebrate the legacy they left behind. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's take this emotional journey together. Let's go. Kenberry as Vinton Harper. Kenberry was born on November 3, 1933 in Moline, Illinois. He became a familiar face to audiences as Vinton Vent Harper on Mama's Family, a kind-hearted, bumbling man caught between his overbearing mother Thelma and his lively new wife Naomi. When he took on the role in 1983, Ken was 50 years old. With his charm, gentle humor, and knack for playing the lovable fool, he made Vent an iconic character who brought light-hearted joy to millions during the show's 7-year run. Before Mama's Family, Ken was known for playing Sam Jones in Mayberry RFD, a warm-hearted role tied to classic small-town America. But it was Mama's Family that became his longest-running and most beloved television work. Vent Harper wasn't a high achiever or a hero, but his honest mistakes and tender moments struck a chord with audiences, making him a symbol of imperfect but genuine family love. Despite his success on screen, Ken's personal life was quietly filled with hardship. He married actress Jackie Joseph in 1960, but tragedy struck when their first child died just 6 days after birth. They later adopted 2 children, John and Jennifer, but their marriage ended in 1976. Friends noted that Ken was introspective and perfectionistic, qualities that sometimes created distance in his relationships. After Mama's Family ended in 1990, Ken mostly stepped back from Hollywood, appearing only occasionally in guest spots and focusing on stage work where he could indulge his first loves, singing and dancing. He also found joy in vintage cars, motorcycles, and the outdoors. Living quietly in California with his longtime companion stage manager Susie Walsh, who was by his side for 24 years. His net worth was estimated at around $4 million, largely from residuals, touring theater work, and some low-profile investments. Tragedy continued to touch his life. In 2016, Ken lost his adopted son, John, to brain cancer. On December 1, 2018, Kenberry passed away at a Burbank hospital after battling heart complications at the age of 85. 2 years later, his adopted daughter, Jennifer, also died of natural causes in 2020, leaving fans with a deep sense of sorrow for the gentle, talented man who had brought so much joy. Barney Martin as Billy Field. Barney Martin was born on March 3, 1923 in New York. When he was 65 years old, he appeared as Billy Field in an episode of Mama's Family, a cheerful old man who loved to crack jokes and bring a bit of warmth to the Harper family's usual chaos. But behind his on-screen humor lay a life shaped by responsibility and the weight of his past. Before becoming an actor, Barney served as a New York City police officer for 20 years. From the post-war period, through a time of rising crime, he witnessed violence, loss, and several near-death experiences. In his final years on the force, Martin admitted to battling insomnia and nightmares about the crime scenes he'd seen. Acting didn't come to him as a dream, but as a way to escape those haunting memories. He once said, "I didn't want to die without ever having tried to live for myself." Martin was also a lifelong smoker, a habit that started during his police years to cope with stress. Although he managed to quit in the early 1990s, years of damage had taken their toll, and he was diagnosed with bladder cancer after retiring from acting. In his personal life, Martin was a devoted husband. He lived with his wife, Kathleen Martin, from the 1940s until his death. They had one daughter, and he often turned down long-term roles that would keep him away from home too long. Above all, he prioritized family over fame. Sadly, Barney Martin passed away on March 21, 2005, at the age of 82, surrounded by loved ones. His net worth was estimated at about $1 million, modest given his contributions and the impact of his beloved role as Morty Seinfeld. Betty White as Ellen Harper Jackson. Betty Marion White was born on January 17, 1922 in Oak Park, Illinois. When she was 61 years old, she took on the role of Ellen Harper Jackson in Mama's Family. As Thelma Harper's eldest daughter, Ellen came across as a snooty socialite who constantly clashed with her mother and siblings over her high society lifestyle and haughty attitude. Although not a main character, Betty White's sharp wit and natural comedic talent made Ellen unforgettable. After Mama's Family, Betty entered the most dazzling period of her career with the Golden Girls. She continued to shine in major productions like Lake Placid 1999, The Proposal 2009, and voiced characters in Toy Story 4. With over 115 screen credits, she earned a Guinness World Record for the longest TV career by a female entertainer spanning more than 80 uninterrupted years. At the time of her passing, her net worth was estimated at around $75 million, thanks to acting residuals and endorsement deals. In her personal life, Betty White was married 3 times. Her first 2 marriages to Dick Barker and Lane Allen were short-lived, but in 1963, she married password host Alan Luton, a union she described as the best and only one that ever mattered. When Luton died of stomach cancer in 1981, she chose never to remarry. Once saying, "When you've had the best, who needs anyone else?" Betty had no biological children, but dedicated much of her life and wealth to animal charities, including the Morris Animal Foundation and the Los Angeles Zoo. At 99, Betty White continued to astonish the world with her sharp mind and boundless energy. But on December 25, 2021, she suffered a mild stroke. 6 days later, on the morning of December 31st, she passed away peacefully in her sleep at her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles, just 17 days shy of her 100th birthday. The world lost a legend, but her legacy lives on. Kathleen Freeman as Big Joan McCall. Kathleen Freeman was born on February 17, 1923 in Chicago, Illinois. When she was 64 years old, she appeared in an episode of Mama's Family as Big Joan McCall, a tough, loud woman who wasn't afraid to clash, especially with her burly husband. Although it was a small role, Freeman still made audiences laugh with the signature comedy style she had honed over more than half a century. But behind that humor was a life she herself once described as professionally lonely. Freeman never married, had no children, and almost never spoke publicly about her private life. People only knew of Helen Ramsey, a former classmate from UCLA, who was her close companion for decades through vague descriptions like longtime friend in obituaries. In an era when Hollywood was still wary of special friendships, that relationship was the most carefully guarded part of Freeman's life, like a photo kept forever hidden away. Throughout her decades on stage and screen, Freeman steered clear of luxury. Despite appearing in more than 200 films and TV shows from Singing in the Rain 1952 to The Blues Brothers 1980, and even Shrek 2001, she lived in a modest apartment in Los Angeles. She quietly taught acting to local students and tirelessly devoted herself to the theater. Her relentless work earned her a net worth of about $1 million. In her final years, Freeman finally reached the artistic heights that had long seemed reserved for others. Her role as Jeanette in The Full Monty on Broadway earned her a Tony nomination and a Theatre World Award, a triumph for someone over 70. But just 5 days after her final performance, when the applause was still ringing, she collapsed. A late-stage lung cancer diagnosis had quietly drained her strength, and she died on August 23, 2001 in New York, before she could truly savor the recognition she had deserved for so long. Earl Bowen as Reverend Lloyd Meacham. Earl Bowen was born on August 8, 1941 in New York. When he was 42 years old, he took on the role of Reverend Lloyd Meacham in Mama's Family in 1983. As the pastor of Raytown, Reverend Meacham was calm, wise, and often acted as a peaceful presence in the middle of the Harper family's endless squabbles. The role left a mark thanks to Bowen's subtle performance and gentle humor, standing in stark contrast to his own turbulent personal life. In 1970, he married actress Carol Keane, the woman he always called the only light in his life. They had no children, but Bowen often said that having Carol was more than enough. Tragedy struck in 2001 when Carol died of ovarian cancer at the age of 58. Her sudden passing left Earl devastated. Friends said he withdrew from public life, rarely accepted interviews, and became unusually quiet. Although he was once a familiar face on sitcoms like Who's the Boss, ALF, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, he gradually retreated behind the scenes, focusing on voice work, which he described as a job where he didn't have to fake a smile. In his solitude after Carol's death, Bowen found refuge in the world of games and animation. He became the voice of several generations through characters like LeChuck in Monkey Island and King Torinas in World of Warcraft. His line, "No king rules forever my son," is considered one of the most moving moments in gaming history. During this period, Bowen quietly remarried in 2008 and moved to Hawaii, living so privately that few even knew about his new marriage. His net worth at the time was estimated at around $1 million. In the fall of 2022, his final chapter began when he developed a persistent cough and was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. According to close family, he declined chemotherapy, choosing instead a peaceful farewell under the Hawaiian skies. He passed away on January 5, 2023, at the age of 81. Rue McClanahan as Aunt Fran Crowley. Rue McClanahan was born on February 21, 1934, in Healton, Oklahoma. When she was 49 years old, she became known to audiences for her role as Aunt Fran Crowley in the sitcom Mama's Family. A tidy, anxious local journalist who often found herself flustered by the chaos of the Harper family. Fran was a subtle, contrasting piece to the fiery Thelma Harper, and the role allowed Rue to shine with her understated satirical and deeply human comedic style. This part became an important stepping stone, leading her to greater fame just 2 years later with The Golden Girls. After the first season, Rue left Mama's Family to play Blanche Devoe, a man-crazy Southern belle in The Golden Girls. The choice brought her immense success, earning her an Emmy and making her an icon of independent, middle-aged women. Despite her career triumphs, Rue's personal life was full of turmoil. She married 6 times, each marriage beginning with hope, but ending in disappointment. In her memoir, My First 5 Husbands and the Ones Who Got Away, she admitted she was always searching for someone who could understand and endure the contradictions inside me. Rue's net worth at the time of her passing was estimated at around $5 million, mostly from royalties, and her celebrated work on Broadway in shows like The Women and Wicked. Her first husband, Tom Bish, left her just a year after their son Mark was born, leaving Rue to raise him alone while struggling to land acting roles. The marriages that followed to directors, producers, and businessmen didn't last, partly because Rue was so busy, and partly because she was fiercely independent. She once described herself as a woman who liked to be in control but always melted for love. In 1997, Rue was diagnosed with breast cancer. After aggressive treatment, the cancer went into remission. But in 2009, she underwent major heart surgery. Despite receiving attentive care just a few months later, on June 3, 2010, she passed away at the age of 76 from a brain hemorrhage, an unexpected and heartbreaking loss for millions of fans. Harvey Corman as Alistair Quince. Harvey Corman was born on February 15, 1927 in Chicago, Illinois. When he was 56 years old, he charmed television audiences in Mama's Family with 2 memorable roles: Alistair Quint, the satirical narrator of the show's early episodes, and Ed Higgins, the long-suffering husband of Eunice in episodes tied to the Carol Burnett show universe. Quint was a brilliant parody of classic anthology hosts like those of Masterpiece Theater, showcasing Corman's intelligent self-deprecation and rare comedic elegance. Behind the roaring laughter he inspired was a private life marked by quiet struggles and personal contradictions. His first marriage to Donna Ert lasted 17 years before ending in divorce in 1977. Close friends said Harvey often brought the pressures of work home. He was a perfectionist prone to stress and unusually serious offstage, sometimes even distant from his family. After the divorce, he rarely spoke publicly about it, focusing instead on quietly raising their 2 children and steering clear of media attention on his private life. That sense of isolation deepened when Corman left Mama's Family after its first season. Although he helped shape the series, he declined to continue when NBC canceled the show and it moved to syndication. Many insiders believed the real reason was the tense divorce between Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton, the show's producer, which made the atmosphere backstage unbearable. As Burnett's longtime friend, Corman felt trapped and chose to walk away. Letting go of a project he had invested so much in was a painful blow, especially since he had directed over 30 episodes and was considered a quiet force behind the series. He found some peace when he married Deborah Fritz in 1982. But life never became completely calm. As a father of 4 and an artist whose career was winding down, Harvey bore a heavy emotional load that few saw. During comedy tours with Tim Conway, he still made crowds roar with laughter, but would retreat backstage afterward, rarely socializing or truly smiling once the spotlight dimmed. In his later years, his health declined rapidly. In late 2007, Corman was hospitalized for an abdominal aortic aneurysm. Although he underwent surgery, he never fully recovered. On May 29, 2008, he passed away at UCLA Medical Center. His body of work from The Carol Burnett Show and Blazing Saddles to Mama's Family continues to bring joy to generations. Anne Haney as Alberta Meacham. Anne Haney was born on March 4, 1934, in Memphis, Tennessee. When she was 52 years old, she appeared in Mama's Family as Alberta Meacham, the strict wife of Reverend Meacham, a woman who upheld order and discipline and never gave in to the Harper family's chaos. Every time Alberta appeared, viewers saw a stark contrast between her stiff exterior and the absurd situations unfolding around her. The small role left a lasting impression and reflected Anne Haney's own life of quiet restraint. Anne didn't start out in acting. After graduating from the University of North Carolina, she married John Haney, a public television director. They had 1 daughter and lived a stable life in the American South. But everything changed on April 9, 1980, when John died suddenly after a serious illness. She was 46 at the time, and their daughter was about to leave for college. Haney later joked, "My husband died, my daughter went off to college, the dog got manged, and the maid quit, so I headed to Hollywood." Beneath that humor, however, was a deep plunge into the unknown. She sought out acting roles not out of passion, but because she had nothing left to hold on to. In the harsh world of Hollywood, Anne didn't have the advantage of youth or glamour. All she had was community theater experience and an empty heart. But with persistence, she won audiences over in small but mighty supporting roles. Her most notable parts were Mrs. Sellner in Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, and Greta in Liar Liar, 1997, where she brought both laughter and bittersweet depth to characters who seemed trapped in their own boxes. During this period, Haney finally found financial stability, amassing an estimated $500,000 through steady work and side contracts. In 2000, after filming a guest role in ER, Anne began to feel unwell. Her health declined rapidly, and on May 26, 2001, she died of heart failure at age 67 in the home where she had lived alone for 2 decades. Nicholas Worth as Big John McCall. Nicholas Worth was born on September 4, 1937, in St. Louis, Missouri. When he was 50 years old, he played Big John McCall in an episode of Mama's Family, a rude, gruff man who caused awkwardness and tension for the whole family. The brief but intense role was typical of Worth's screen image, menacing, unforgettable, and fierce. What few knew was that Worth paid a high price for that image. For decades, he was typecast in extreme villain roles, from a rapist in The Rape of Richard Beck, 1985, to a deranged killer in Don't Answer the Phone, 1980. These performances, which chilled audiences, also made Hollywood reluctant to cast him in anything else. Though Worth once said he was capable of much more, no one offered him the chance. His career remained stuck on the margins of fame. After Mama's Family, he continued with roles in Darkman 1990 and voiced characters in games like Command and Conquer. But he never escaped the villain mold. The cost of staying loyal to his craft was old age marked by poor health and modest earnings. His net worth at the end of his life was only around $300,000. Worth lived in solitude. No wife, no children, no scandals, no glamour. A former paratrooper who served 3 years in the military, he later trained at Carnegie Tech and the Pasadena Playhouse. That solitude and his past eventually led him to faith, becoming a devout Christian. But even that could only ease so much of the sting of being forgotten by the very audience he once terrified. Nicholas Worth died on May 7, 2007 in Los Angeles from heart failure at the age of 69. His passing drew little fanfare, just a few quiet tributes to a familiar face from 1980s and 90s cinema. Richard Dawson as himself. Richard Dawson was born on November 20, 1932 in Gosport, England. When he was 51 years old, he appeared in Mama's Family in 1983 as himself, a charming, cheerful figure who symbolized the friendly, humorous spirit of television's golden era. Behind the bright, kissing bandit persona on stage, Dawson endured much personal pain and turmoil. His first marriage to screen star Diana Dors ended bitterly, with both accusing the other of infidelity. Once dubbed the King and Queen of England in Hollywood, the couple split after 8 years, leaving behind 2 children and a long legal battle. After the divorce, Dawson won custody of the boys, rare at the time, and raised them alone while juggling his demanding television career. In 1981, while hosting Family Feud, Dawson met Gretchen Johnson, a contestant on the show. Their romance with a 20-year age gap sparked media chatter. But this time, Dawson found lasting happiness. They married in 1991 and had 1 daughter, remaining together until his death. In his later years, Dawson stepped away from the spotlight, declining even special appearances on new Family Feud versions. With a net worth of about $2 million, he lived quietly in Beverly Hills, focusing on family as a way to make up for time lost to fame. But age didn't bring the peace he'd hoped for. A heavy smoker for decades, Dawson tried to quit in the late 1980s, but the damage was done. In early 2012, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. Just a few months later, on June 2, 2012, Richard Dawson passed away at age 79 in Los Angeles, a loss that stunned fans everywhere. Imagigene Koka. As Gert Corey born. Imagigene Koka, on November 18, 1908, was 75 years old when she appeared in Mama's Family as Guy Corey, a sharp-witted woman who delivered gentle but meaningful laughs. But behind those moments of comedy was a life marked by quiet loss, illness, and loneliness that followed her to the very end. Koka's life was filled with silent heartbreaks. In 1955, just a month after her mother passed away, her first husband, composer Bob Burton, also died suddenly after 20 years of marriage. Koka was devastated. The funeral was held in near silence, and from that point on she became increasingly private, retreating even as her career soared. It wasn't until 1960 that she opened her heart again, marrying actor King Donovan. They spent 27 years together until his death in 1987. 2 great loves, 2 painful goodbyes. With no children and no close family left, Koka spent her final years with only old colleagues and a few friends. In late 1972, a car accident severely damaged her right eye, shattering her cheekbone and injuring her cornea. A lengthy surgery restored her facial structure, but not her vision. From then on, she often wore dark glasses to hide the eye that could no longer see, a painful symbol for the gaze she had once used to observe, mimic, and make people laugh. Yet, she never complained. In 1978, at age 70, she returned to Broadway, and on the 20th century, a courageous artistic comeback in the shadow of declining health. In her final years, Koka battled Alzheimer's disease. As her memory faded, she still tried to appear as a guest on shows like Moonlighting, even earning an Emmy nomination, proof of a talent that wouldn't fade. But eventually, forgetting co-stars' names and getting lost on the way to set became common. She lived quietly in a small house in Westport, Connecticut, spending much of her time by the window, no longer remembering who she once was. At her peak, Koka's net worth was estimated at about $1 million. Not huge by Hollywood standards, but enough for her to remain independent until the end. She passed away on June 2, 2001 at the age of 92. William Windham as Woody Miller. William Windham was born on September 28, 1923 in New York. When he was 60 years old, he appeared in Mama's Family in 1983 as Woody Miller, a charming gentleman who brought humor and grace to the chaotic world of Raytown. But behind that polished exterior was a personal life filled with storms that few ever saw. In stark contrast to his easygoing on-screen image, Windham's real life was marked by inner turmoil. He was married 5 times, with 4 of those marriages ending in divorce. His first marriage to Carol Kaiser lasted 8 years before quietly ending. His second marriage to actress Barbara Joyce also fell apart quickly due to distance after Windham moved permanently to California. His third wife, Barbara Clare, granddaughter of MGM mogul Louis B. Mayer, brought new pressures. Windham became a stepfather to her 2 children, and in 1964 they had their first child together. But just 4 years later, the marriage crumbled. The fractures weren't just because of his demanding work schedule, but also his fiercely independent nature, which made family life difficult for him. When My World and Welcome to It earned him an Emmy in 1970, Windham was entering his 4th marriage, this time to Jacqueline Hopkins, who was nearly 20 years younger. They had 2 daughters, but Windham continued to immerse himself in work, long trips away, and his passion for playing chess alone for hours. This marriage too ended in 1975, a time when, as he admitted in an interview, he had lost control of himself. That same year, he married for the 5th time to Patricia Tunder, a production assistant he met on a TV project. This relationship would turn out to be his most enduring, lasting until his death. But even this wasn't without its challenges. Windham once shared that it took him years to break his habit of sailing off alone on his boat whenever they argued. In 1978, at 55 years old, he welcomed a son, Rebel, with Patricia. In his final years, Windham lived quietly in California, enjoying chess and sailing. But heart disease gradually took its toll. On August 16, 2012, he died at home at the age of 88 from congestive heart failure. His net worth at the time was estimated at around $2 million, most of it from his long career in television rather than film. The stars of Mama's Family left behind unforgettable legacies, though many departed under tragic circumstances. Which character from the series was your favorite? Share your memories in the comments and hit subscribe so you won't miss more touching stories about legends of the screen.